Welcome, dear listeners, to another journey into the timeless world of myths. Today we arrive in Sparta, a land not only of warriors but of beauty, mystery, and stories that echo across ages. Our tale is one that poets, artists, and dreamers have carried in their hearts for centuries. It is the story of Zeus, the mighty king of the gods, and Leda, the radiant queen of Sparta. This is not a tale of thunderbolts or fierce battles, but of softer images painted in twilight. Picture a quiet riverbank at dusk, the golden light fading, and a swan gliding gracefully over still waters. It is a story where power and elegance intertwine, where the divine brushes against the mortal world. From this meeting, legends take flight, giving birth to children whose destinies shape Greek mythology itself. Through this myth, art and literature across centuries found endless inspiration and creative fire. But myths are more than stories. They are symbols, whispers from the past, offering mystery, lessons, and wonder. So, let us begin our journey with a queen, a river, and a swan whose wings shimmer in eternal memory. Close your eyes, dear listener, and imagine Sparta not as the land of warriors, but as a place of beauty and harmony. Picture olive groves stretching through valleys, their silver leaves dancing under the warmth of the Greek Sunday. Rivers flow gently across the countryside, carrying whispers of timeless myths to fields and villages along their banks. Mountains rise in the distance, their peaks glowing with dawn, while plains below offer life and abundance. Sparta in this tale is not strict or harsh, but alive with birdsong in the morning and fragrant breezes in the evening. It is a land where reality and myth intertwine, where streams and hills hold the unseen presence of the gods. In the heart of this land lived Leda, the Queen of Sparta, admired for her beauty, wisdom, and quiet strength. She was loved not only in the palace, but also by shepherds in fields and women at rivers who spoke of her kindness. Her presence was like sunlight, warm and reassuring, guiding her people with fairness and grace in every season. Though her days were filled with royal duties, she cherished twilight walks, listening to leaves and watching the stars emerge. But myths remind us that mortal lives never stand apart. The gods often look down, sometimes with longing, sometimes with envy. Zeus, ruler of Olympus, watched the mortal world, his gaze drawn toward Sparta and the queen whose spirit rivaled the stars. From Olympus, he saw the mountains glowing in fading light, the rivers sparkling, and Leda walking serenely beneath twilight skies. In that stillness, mortal and divine seemed closer, the air itself carrying the hint of a story waiting to unfold. Sparta seemed to pause in those moments, as if trees, rivers, and winds knew destiny was about to awaken. This was no ordinary queen, and no ordinary land, but a stage where myth and history were woven together. So remember Sparta as a place of harmony, and Leda as a woman of light, cherished by her people and noticed by the gods. And remember that in Greek myth, the gentlest settings, a river, twilight, a quiet evening, often cradle the greatest stories. High above the mortal world stood Olympus, not just a mountain, but the eternal home of the gods. Its shining halls were filled with light, where Zeus reigned as king and master of the skies. Apollo played his golden lyre, Athena spoke wisdom, and Hera moved with grace and dignity. Yet, even in such grandeur, Zeus often let his thoughts wander beyond the walls of Olympus. He was lord of thunder and storm, but his gaze often turned downward to the mortal world. He watched their fleeting lives, so brief, yet so vibrant, filled with laughter, sorrow, and dreams. From Olympus he saw their beauty, and he felt drawn to what gods could admire but not hold. One evening he looked down as sunset painted the valleys, rivers, and mountains of Greece. There his eyes fell upon Sparta, glowing in twilight, where a queen walked by the river. It was Leda, moving with quiet grace, her spirit radiant like a flame in the fading light. Zeus felt his heart stir, not with conquest, but with a longing for closeness and harmony. He pondered carefully, knowing the presence of a god could overwhelm the peace of mortals. So he considered transformation, as gods often did when they sought to walk among men. Apollo once walked as a shepherd, Hermes as a traveler, Athena as a guide in disguise. And Zeus, too, could take on forms, shaping himself to suit the path destiny required. This time, he did not think of an eagle or a mighty bull, but of a swan. The swan was pure and graceful, gliding across still waters, its wings shining like ivory. It symbolized serenity and mystery, a creature of elegance rather than fear or power. In that gentle form, Zeus believed he could draw near to Leda with wonder, not dread. The decision grew clear as twilight deepened, and Sparta lay quiet beneath the evening sky. Other gods watched silently, knowing that Zeus's heart had been stirred many times before. Some smiled, some turned away, but all understood that fate often moved in these moments. Perhaps the fates themselves were already weaving threads that stretched toward unborn destinies. From Zeus and Leda would come children whose lives would echo through Greek myth and beyond. But for now, Zeus simply stood upon Olympus, his gaze fixed upon the Queen of Sparta. Her figure shone with dignity and calm as she walked slowly along the riverbank. And the king of the gods, clothed in eternity, felt time itself brush gently against him. In that silence, he knew the swan would be his path to her, his bridge to destiny. Thus the tale shifted from Olympus to earth, from thunder to twilight, from power to grace. The king of the gods prepared to descend, not with storms, but with the wings of a swan. When people think of Zeus, they imagine thunder in his hand and the sky trembling at his command. But in this story, Zeus did not call on storms or fire. Instead, he turned his thoughts toward gentleness and beauty, searching for a form that could speak without words. The idea came to him like a whisper, soft and delicate, like the distant song of a lyre on the breeze. He thought of the swan, a creature unlike any storm, yet powerful in its quiet grace, gliding across water with wings as white as ivory. The swan carried no thunder, no roar, no fire, only stillness, mystery, and elegance. For the Greeks, the swan was more than a bird. It was sacred to Apollo, the god of music and light, and appeared often in songs and poetry. The swan symbolized purity, transformation, and a bridge between divine mystery and mortal beauty. Zeus, wise in symbols, knew this was the form he must choose. He imagined himself drifting on still waters, feathers glowing softly in twilight, a vision of serenity, not as the ruler of heaven, but as a swan approaching the Queen of Sparta in calm silence. The thought filled him with peace. This time he would not bring fear with lightning or storms, but wonder with the flight of a swan. He understood that mortals often trembled when faced with divine glory. But the swan was different. It was admired, trusted, even welcomed, a symbol of beauty that mortal hearts could embrace. And so Zeus prepared himself for this transformation. A master of shape and form, he could walk the earth in many guises. But this was more than disguise. It was a choice to embody serenity, elegance, and timeless mystery. From Olympus, he gazed down at Sparta once more. The rivers shimmered, olive groves whispered, and the queen moved with dignity beneath the fading sky. He pictured the swan descending softly, wings outstretched, gliding across waters like a living poem. It would not be a scene of power, but of beauty, an image that would echo across centuries of memory. The swan became an eternal picture in myth, carrying the weight of transformation and longing. It showed how even the mightiest gods could choose wonder over force, beauty over fear. The gods of Olympus understood this choice. Apollo may have smiled, for the swan was dear to him. Aphrodite would have seen the beauty of the gesture, and even the fates paused their weaving. They knew this vision would ripple far into the future, shaping stories and destinies yet to come. For from this single decision, a chain of events would follow, leading to children of both divine and mortal. But before fate could unfold, there was only this moment, Zeus imagining himself as a swan, a creature of twilight beauty, gliding toward Leda with calm wings and silent grace. It is tender to think of, isn't it, that the greatest of gods chose to appear not as thunder or flame, but as a swan, a creature of silence, of calm waters, of beauty shining softly in the evening light. This was not weakness, but wisdom. Sometimes wonder speaks louder than power, and so vision became decision. Zeus would descend not with storms, but with ivory feathers glowing in twilight, not with lightning, but with wings catching the golden glow of the setting Sunday. In this form, he would draw near to Leda, and destiny would begin its quiet course. The story moves forward not on battlefields, nor in halls of kings, but on still waters. A queen, a swan, and a moment destined to echo forever through art, poetry, and human imagination. As twilight settled over Sparta, the hills turned violet and golden light clung to olive trees. In that soft hour, between day and night, Queen Leda often found her peace. Her beauty was sung in poems, but her wisdom and calm heart defined her far more deeply. She balanced her role as queen and as woman with grace that earned admiration from all. That evening, she walked by the river Eurotas, alone in the fading glow of day. The water gleamed like a ribbon of gold, carrying the last fire of the sun across the land. Birds offered their final songs before silence, as if honoring the queen's solitude. Her robe brushed gently against the grass as her thoughts drifted to children and kingdom. Responsibility weighed on her, yet she drew comfort from the constancy of nature. The river flowed, the olive groves whispered, and the stars prepared to rise above Sparta. Her people saw her as more than queen. She was harmony itself, strength wrapped in gentleness. Unlike rulers who inspired fear, she drew loyalty with kindness and quiet dignity. At the riverbank, the crown's weight seemed to fall away, leaving her simply as Leda. She gazed into twilight's reflection on the water, breathing deeply, heart attuned to silence. Rare was the moment she was truly alone, free of palace voices and endless duty. Here, beside the river, she belonged only to herself and the rhythm of evening. Her hand touched the cool water, ripples spreading in widening circles across the surface. She thought of how even small actions ripple outward, shaping lives, kingdoms, and time. Above, the sky shifted from rose to indigo, stars kindling like distant fires. The moon rose pale and serene, a silver guardian over the land of Sparta. Leda looked upward, as she often did, wondering about the stories written in stars. Was her own story already there, waiting to be sung by poets yet unborn? In the stillness, she felt something unusual, a presence, quiet yet undeniable. No sound, no shadow, but the sense the world itself was holding its breath. The air seemed charged, not with fear, but with expectation, gentle and mysterious. She dismissed the thought, returning her gaze to the river's mirrored glow. The water reflected sky and trees, bending softly under the touch of evening wind. To her, the river was a bridge between heaven and earth, two realms intertwined. She believed the gods watched, though they hid their actions behind veils of mystery. At times, she wondered if she was merely a piece on their eternal board. Yet tonight, her heart was quiet, desiring no answers, only the river's peace. The stars above, the whispering leaves, the cool evening air, all felt enough. But destiny rarely waits for those who seek stillness in the fading light. Unseen by her, twilight was already becoming the backdrop of a larger story. The night deepened as Leda lingered by the water, calm and unaware. Serene, she carried herself with the same majesty that defined her reign. The queen in twilight, unknowing that eternity had already turned its gaze upon her. The evening deepened over Sparta as the sky unfolded its velvet cloak of stars across the land. Moonlight glimmered on the erotas, turning the river into a silver path winding through the night. From the heights of Olympus, Zeus prepared himself, choosing the form of the swan for descent. Where thunder once marked his coming, now only ivory feathers would reveal his presence. Transformation was his gift, yet this change carried meaning beyond disguise or trickery. This was poetry, a choice of beauty over fear, of wonder over power. As a swan, his wings spread wide, feathers glowing softly as if brushed with moonlight. He descended gently, drifting through the night air toward the mortal world below. No storm broke, no thunder roared, no lightning split the heavens as he came. There was only stillness, the quiet rhythm of wings, moving like a hidden song. He glided past hills and olive groves, unseen by mortals resting in their homes. Sparta lay silent, unaware of the god who passed above its sleeping fields. The olive trees swayed gently, as if bowing in reverence to his journey. The fields shimmered in moonlight, seas of silver stretching under the swan's shadow. Even the night air seemed charged, awaiting the moment about to unfold. Closer and closer he came to the river where Queen Leda lingered in thought. The water mirrored the sky, so stars seemed to glide upon the flowing river. When the swan approached, it looked as though heaven itself touched the water. And there was Leda, serene and calm, standing with dignity at the river's edge. Her reflection shimmered in the water, mingling with twilight's fading glow. For a heartbeat, Zeus paused, marveling at the sight of the Queen of Sparta. Even for the king of gods, her harmony of strength and gentleness stirred wonder. He descended lower, skimming across the water, his reflection touching hers in ripples. The swan's ivory feathers glowed, blending with the silver shimmer of moonlit river. To Leda, it must have seemed like a vision born of twilight dreams. A swan of unearthly beauty gliding toward her, drawn by invisible threads of fate. Time seemed to hold its breath as queen and swan beheld one another. The stars burned above, the river whispered. Yet all else faded into silence. This was no thunderous arrival of a god demanding awe or fear. This was the quiet wonder of a swan descending in the soft light of night. In that stillness, destiny touched the earth with wings of ivory and calm. Later, poets would sing of it, carrying the image across centuries of memory. Painters would capture the vision, keeping its glow alive in colors and brushstrokes. But in that moment, there was only silence, beauty, and meeting by the river. The descent was complete. The god had crossed from Olympus to mortal ground. He chose gentleness instead of storms, beauty instead of fear and command. And in that choice, a myth began to take its place in eternity. Leda stood at the river, the swan before her, twilight deepening around them. The stars bore witness above, eternal and silent, watching fate unfold its design. What had been vision was now reality. shimmering in the glow of twilight. The river Eurotas shimmered under the moonlight, its surface calm, whispering softly like a lullaby for the earth. Leda stood at its edge, serene and thoughtful, her gaze lost in silver ripples stretching endlessly through the night. Behind her, Sparta slept in silence, leaving her alone with the river and the velvet embrace of twilight. The queen often found peace here, away from the weight of duty, crowns, and expectations. In the river's flow, she found comfort, reminded that time moves steadily forward beyond mortal struggles. But tonight was different, for the night itself seemed charged with something unseen and mysterious. The olive trees hushed their leaves, the air shimmered, and the stars leaned closer, curious and still. Then she saw it, a swan descending, wings outstretched, ivory feathers glowing with moonlit radiance. It glided gracefully, guided by an unseen breath, until it touched the river with perfect stillness. Ripples spread, catching the light, turning the water into a mirror of starlight and silver dreams. Leda's breath caught, for this was no ordinary swan. It carried a presence that defied the ordinary. Its eyes held calm, its movements divine, its glow far beyond nature's simple beauty. The swan drifted toward her, its gaze steady, as if recognizing her spirit across the ages. She did not retreat, nor did she advance. She stood quietly, her heart steady in wonder. No fear stirred within her. Only awe and the quiet hum of destiny filled the night. The river mirrored them both, queen and swan, their reflections dancing together in rippling silver. No words passed between them, yet presence became its own language, a story written in stillness. The air felt alive, humming with fate, carrying the sense of something eternal unfolding now. The swan lowered its head with a reverence that surprised her, as if honoring her presence. Leda too lowered her gaze, drawn by an instinct beyond reason, meeting silence with grace. In that moment, queen and swan, mortal and divine, stood as equals by the riverbank. The stars burned brighter above, eternal witnesses to this quiet meeting beneath the moon. The river flowed on, yet its music seemed softer, as though singing to the scene. Perhaps Leda knew, in her heart, that this swan was no simple creature of earth. Perhaps she sensed the divine beneath the feathers, the hidden presence of Zeus himself. Or perhaps she only felt she was at the edge of a story larger than herself. The swan drew closer, its reflection merging with hers, the water trembling with light. She did not step back. Instead, she stood still, letting the silence bind them together. The air shimmered between them, charged with the unseen threads of destiny's careful weaving. It was the stillness before a turning point, the pause before history writes itself forever. On the banks of the Eurotas, beneath the moon's silver watch, they finally met. No words were spoken. No fear was raised. Only silence, wonder, and reverence remained. The night itself held its breath. The earth leaned closer, and fate quietly took its place. The night carried a stillness that was alive, a quiet full of meaning. As the swan neared, it folded its wings gently, resting by the riverbank where Leda stood beneath the moon. For a moment, neither moved, as if the earth itself paused to watch what might unfold. Leda felt no fear. Instead, a calmness rose within her, as if fate had prepared this. An unseen thread seemed to tie her spirit to the swan's, subtle yet undeniable in its pull. The bird lowered its head with grace, not in pride, but in reverence and quiet honor. The world hushed, the rustle of leaves, the river's murmur, and Sparta's life faded away. Zeus, hidden in feather and grace, looked upon her not just as queen, but as woman, She was harmony itself, strength and gentleness woven together in a way even gods admired. The swan drifted closer, its reflection touching hers, as if fate had already written their bond. Leda reached out, her hand hovering in wonder, uncertain if she touched dream or reality. Her fingers brushed the feathers, soft as moonlight, alive with warmth beyond natural form. It was not bird to hand, but divine and mortal meeting in a quiet moment of truth. Leda's lips curved faintly in a smile as she whispered, "You are unlike any creature." The swan made no sound, yet its gaze spoke with a depth no words could ever hold. Their bond was silent, yet full, a circle drawn around them by the hand of eternity. The stars above watched steadily, while the river flowed on, singing softly beneath the scene. Every part of the world seemed to conspire to hold this moment still and unbroken. In feathers and stillness, Zeus chose beauty over thunder, reverence over force and command. Through silence, he conveyed admiration, respect, and a wonder that bridged mortal and divine. Leda felt the truth of it. This moment was larger than Sparta, larger than herself. It was something destined to ripple across time, though she thought only of the now. For Zeus, too, this was rare, for he knew storms and worship, not gentle presence. Here, as swan by the queen, he felt the rare grace of being seen in stillness. They lingered together, bound not by fear or power, but by quiet recognition and wonder. No thunder roared, no clouds gathered, only calm night, wrapped in silver and silence. The swan spread its wings slightly, not to fly, but to mark the space they shared. Leda stood steady, her eyes unafraid, reflecting only the quiet awe of what she saw. It was a wonder that could not be explained, only felt deep within the human soul. This was a story not yet told, but alive, glowing in the moment they created. On the banks of the Eurotas, under silver moonlight, a silent bond was woven, not with words, not with force, but with stillness that would echo through time forever. The morning after, Sparta stirred awake with its usual rhythm, filled with markets, warriors, and songs of life. Leda moved through her halls with calm grace, though her heart carried a quiet and wondrous weight. The memory of the swan lingered like a hidden flame, burning silently in the folds of her soul. She spoke of it to no one, not even to her handmaidens, who saw her gaze grow distant. Outside, the world turned, as always, kings plotting, warriors training, poets weaving verses of glory. No one imagined that in the silence of their queen, destiny was already shaping its threads. Myths are not born with thunder. They begin as whispers, fragile yet stronger than iron or stone. Leda herself could not foresee what would come, but she felt the breeze of change around her. It was like the first wind before a storm, or the dim glow that precedes the dawn. She knew she was no longer only Sparta's queen. Something greater had touched her life forever. The night by the river was not dream or illusion, but the weaving of a timeless story. The gods had stepped into her path, and she now bore the secret of divine encounter. In her chamber, she closed her eyes, recalling feathers soft as moonlight, silence deeper than words. She did not fear it, nor regret it, for it was now part of her being. The days passed. Sparta thrived, yet its queen walked with a secret beyond walls and crown. Whispers stirred in the air, faint but growing, first in poets' hearts, then in seers' visions. They sensed a story of a queen touched by divinity, though her name remained unspoken. Fate does not stay hidden. Gods leave echoes that stretch outward through time and memory. The swan had flown, but its presence lingered in stars, rivers, and moonlight crossing the sky. Each sign whispered the truth. Something greater had been set into motion that night. In time, the secret would grow into legend, carried by voices, art, marble, and memory. Some would call it romance, others mystery, but all would know it as part of myth. For now, it lived quietly, like an ember glowing unseen, waiting to become eternal flame. Leda ruled with dignity, yet carried the memory of that night as her hidden crown. Part 8 closes not with thunder, but with whispers, destiny born in silence, carried into eternity. As seasons turned in Sparta, the memory of that moonlit night did not fade from Leda's heart. She lived as a queen should, with dignity and wisdom, yet carried something larger than mortal life. The halls of Sparta rang with news of wars and treaties, but her secret burned softly within. It was not shame, nor burden, but a mystery that waited to bloom in its own time. Her people saw their queen radiant, whispering that her beauty now carried light touched by starlight. They could not know the truth, for it was not meant for mortal voices, only silence. But myths are seeds in the soil, growing quietly until the season comes for them to rise. What began as one night by the river stretched outward, weaving into the threads of destiny. Poets sang of mortals blessed by gods, their verses hinting at Leda, though no name was spoken. The Swan appeared in story and symbol, echoing beauty, transformation, and the presence of divinity. In her gardens, Leda listened to the wind, recalling the hush of that moonlit encounter. The memory did not haunt her. It guided her like a star that never lost its glow. At night, she dreamed of wings above the river, feeling peace instead of fear in her heart. She sensed the divine had left a gift, unseen yet powerful, waiting for time to unfold. The ripples of fate spread outward, carried by omens in stars, moons, and whispers of seers. Leda spoke nothing of destiny, but she knew her life was now part of a greater design. She ruled Sparta with grace, yet her nights carried the weight of a quiet knowing. The river beyond the walls reminded her that destiny, like water, flows onward without end. Though change approached, she felt no fear, for the divine had come not with thunder but peace. The silence of that night now whispered through the land, growing louder in songs and dreams. The swan had flown, but its presence endured, etched in memory and in the very air. Part 9 closes with seeds of legend planted, ready to grow into tales that would shape Greece. The storm faded, leaving only whispers across the horizon, as if the world itself paused, holding its breath for what would come next. The air was heavy with rain and iron, alive with tension, a reminder that endings were never quiet, but always preludes to something greater waiting to rise. Zeus stood tall, framed by faint light piercing the clouds, his presence commanding, his silence louder than the roar of thunder that had come before. This journey had been long, marked by struggle and revelation, every choice carving the destiny that now pressed upon his shoulders like a storm. The final ascent was before him, a climb not of stone alone, but of spirit, where gods and mortals alike would witness his triumph or his fall. He did not stand alone, for allies who had bled and endured walked beside him, their loyalty forged in shadows and trials they could never forget. Each bore scars, not just of battle, but of choices that had broken and remade them, their eyes now fixed on the summit veiled in light, the mountain path cut upward through jagged stone, a reminder of all who had tried before, their echoes urging him onward, step after step. Every movement carried the weight of history, the voices of rebellion, the cries of loyalty, the silence that demanded only one answer forward. The chamber at the summit glowed with divine energy, its pillars carved with symbols of creation, destruction, and renewal. the eternal cycle alive within stone. At its center shimmered a throne, not of gold or marble, but stormlight itself, pulsing like a heart, demanding strength, vision, and unyielding will. Each step closer was a question: could he lead without tyranny, command without chains, bear the storm without becoming the storm himself? He had no answer but the truth of his journey: to endure, to rise, to walk forward even when the path was shadowed by doubt and fear. Zeus stretched out his hand, and the heavens answered with lightning, serpents of fire coiling around him, binding storm and flesh as one. The chamber trembled, the throne blazed, and in that crucible of thunder, he was accepted not as tyrant, but as one who had endured and risen. Silence followed, yet it was not emptiness but renewal, the stillness after the storm when the world feels cleansed, reborn with clarity and power. Seated upon the throne, Zeus was no longer just a conqueror, but the storm itself embodied. The final ascent complete through becoming, not reaching. But this was not an end. The throne was no chain upon destiny, only the beginning of choices that would echo louder than thunder. The world below would see lightning scar the sky, some in fear, others in hope, yet all knowing a new age had begun beneath his gaze. Zeus understood at last: power was never a crown to wear, but a storm to carry, and his journey, though victorious, had only just begun.